and thinking like that phrase "pencils down" from the comics thing that happened, and then it hit me like, oh, you remember that that pencils down thing? It's like, well, why did they do that? Well, because of the voodoo thing that hit a couple years ago. Remember when they did that? I was thinking, oh, they crashed the world's economy, and then I started thinking about it again. It's like, not exactly. That was the largest upwards wealth transfer from the poor and middle class people to the ultra wealthy, I think ever in history, to the tune of trillions of dollars, where the money just got instantly funneled upwards over 3 years, where they froze entire industries because of what they said was a serious issue. And you look around like, oh, it's kind of weird because I mean, usually the phrases that kind of get you through uh, historical analysis of money or follow the money and who benefits, and you look at the events over the past 3 years, like, so that was just wasn't it? They didn't crash the economy because we all didn't suffer equally. That was an extractive tool. It was an extractive economy where they just funneled that money upwards. And it's like, yeah, oh yeah, all that actually happened. Oh, is anyone going to address that issue? Anyone going to do anything about it? Don't hold your breath on that. Quick, more money. No. You don't understand. We have to give money to Ukraine. We got homeless. Have you seen Portland? Have you seen Oregon, Washington, California? Oh, but we can worry about two things at once. But we never do. We never do. You just take that taxpayer money that send it to foreign countries, or it's not just Ukraine. Don't get me wrong. Oh, you don't understand. You don't understand. Russia will expand. Yeah, but we have domestic issues, and we've had pretty serious domestic issues, and nobody, like, for the past 40 years, 50 years, nobody ever does anything about that. It's just, oh, we can do two things at once. Yeah, but we don't do two things at once. We don't. You just take taxpayer money and you extract it to foreign countries. Weird. It's weird how, like, all this stuff, and I think about this, and I think, the further ends of that political spectrum, on the right and the left, the further ends, it's like they really have some things in common. If they can only get together and talk, they might get together and figure out some solutions. Anyway, a little distracted, yeah, but it's like, who cares? YouTube, who cares about YouTube? So Disney has got, keep in mind, they have like 100 million subs, they say, on Disney Plus, but the most watched show, I think, gets under 2 million views, and a view is simply clicking on the channel counts as a view. The watch time is something else, and I don't think they released those numbers. So the streaming numbers of streaming across the board are low. And it turns out that you can't pay a writer, $1.2 million a series if the show is just not bringing in that kind of money. Hollywood has Larry Fink at BlackRock, but he's not able to fund Hollywood forever. So the Hollywood writer's strike, one of the issues they raised is artificial intelligence stole the writers' jobs. Here's the thing. Yes, it's actually possible for some writing tasks to be done with AI. I read some AI scripts outlines online, and yes, they're getting close. I read a Jimmy Kimmel script, which was his standard type of thing. It wasn't good, but Jimmy Kimmel's not good. It's not that his comedy is good. The writers are good. They're not that at all. It's just his presentation. It's him. Like, he has a captive audience. It's a left-wing audience. You're there to get, you're not there to get spontaneous laughter. You're there to get conscious applause. It's just a left-wing thing. It's like Saturday Night Live. Everyone knows all these late night shows are bad shows, and Saturday Night Live doesn't connect with an audience. You're just there to stay in an echo chamber. People are clapping at this type of stuff. They're not spontaneously laughing. The goal of like left-wing stand-up comedy is not laughter anymore. The thing is, yeah, AI can actually write stuff like a Jimmy Kimmel show, because that's how mundane the writing is, what the lack of creativity is for the writing now. Because it's not like they're not trying to make funny shows like you would have done with these kind of shows in the 80s to get the whole audience. You're just marketing to a left-wing audience. So Hollywood writers were massively overpaid, and now they want guaranteed minimum incomes. But they're writing this global homogenization cancer that doesn't sell, so they want to be subsidized by Hollywood, which is rough because eventually even Hollywood runs out of money. The woke anti-white propaganda doesn't sell as well as they had hoped, so where do the writers think the money is going to come from? The old days of Hollywood are mostly over. Of the big Hollywood of the 80s, yeah, that was just a different universe, the levels of money that was flowing around. And it's hard to say what the modern average is for a Hollywood writer because it's not necessarily a full-time job anymore. You can be writing for small shows and working a few times a year, but on the side, you're a private tutor, you've got a painting company or something. They want to keep their feet wet in Hollywood because if something breaks out as a hit, then the payoff can be very large. But in the 90s, there wasn't any streaming or even many small shows. So the money in Hollywood was mostly amazing for everyone involved, from hair and makeup and catering to set design to script review. Everyone involved in Hollywood back in the 30 years ago, it was just a whole different world where like the people who were doing like hair and makeup were legitimately wealthy people in their own right because they were tied into Hollywood. If you're writing Batgirl or Vagrant Queen now or that kind of equivalent, then you're just probably not getting paid enough to live in Los Angeles without another gig. They used to swim in money and pharmaceutical enhancements. Now they make shows about pox-walks, PLT women who need to put the evil blonde people in their place. It seems like that's in every episode. It's like, we need to teach these evil blue-eyed people another lesson. Yeah, that's probably why people are dipping out of Hollywood. But the thing is, the writers still want a guaranteed minimum of $350,000 a year to write this, what their college professor told them to put in this globalist type of propaganda. So Hollywood is expanding, or the concept of Hollywood of video entertainment, but it's spreading out and it getting thinner, and that's not going to change because there are more streaming shows and outside Hollywood entertainment pressure like YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, the video formats, and then there's podcasts, and then there's video games, and then there's all other forms of entertainment. It's like, well, that steals market share from Hollywood. So people who would, like, if they could erase YouTube and Rumble and Odyssey, BitChute, all the alt media, they absolutely would. So people in Hollywood who in the old days might have been making, $1 million are finding that in the past 10 to 15 years, that money has been dropping pretty quickly. It's still fine, but now you might be doing the same amount of work, but the shows, you're just not doing as many shows per year. And the shows, even if you are, they don't get the same amount of eyeballs because there's too much competition. And then the distribution of those shows is vastly, vastly reduced. Where back in the 80s, you could be watching reruns from like the 60s. That's like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. I think those were somewhere in the mid 63 and 64. And people were probably watching reruns. I think people are watching reruns of those even to this day. There's probably like a Cartoon Network or an old movie TV network that is still showing, I Dream of Jeannie or Love American Style, which is some kind of dating show from the 60s or some bizarre type of shows like that. Or Gilligan's Island. So you could probably go find Gilligan's Island, which actually holds up pretty well for having a budget of like, $10,000 a show or something ridiculously small. The thing is, there's only 24 hours in a day, so every minute that you're watching a YouTube video is a minute that Hollywood is not getting your attention, so their money has been shrinking every year, which is great because Hollywood is obviously, lizard people and they're useful idiots. Even a channel like this gets 1,000 to 2,000 hours a month. That's time that Hollywood isn't getting. But keep in mind, where 20 years ago, the writer might have been making $500,000 to several $1,000,000 a year. Now that average is more like $250,000 and it's shrinking every year. So they went from being legitimately wealthy to just sort of Los Angeles average, and every year, or New York, it gets worse and worse because the alt media streaming shows increase, and they're constantly taking market share from Hollywood. And Hollywood in general is losing a little bit of influence every year. If you paid attention to the award shows over the past, since Trump kind of changed everything, and you see those award shows are just not getting the eyeballs they used to. And Hollywood's not ever going to disappear, but it is not what it used to be, and I don't think it's never going to return to that. In the 80s and 90s, you had everyone from writers to hair, makeup, set designs, caterers, who a lot of those people were legitimate millionaires. Back in the 80s, when to be a millionaire was something when like a house. So you bought a house in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, or around Hollywood, not in the core, but like in the 80s, like a $300,000 house, like on the outskirts of Hollywood. Like, yeah, what does that house cost now? Oh, $4 million. Anyway, Hollywood was a whole different beast back in the 80s and 90s. It was the era of Miami Vice, where they're like, these two vice cops who are on screen busting these people for pharmaceuticals, who you kind of look behind the scenes, you're like, you guys are, I would like to see the pharmaceuticals that are behind the scenes as well. Now, if you're a white male, you either have to put on some makeup and cross-dress, otherwise you're just not going to get hired. BLT, poxwalks, and whiny women get hired, so the shows just aren't as good. And another thing with Hollywood, it kind of started with, I was going to say The Simple Life with Paris Hilton or the Kardashians, but I think it was the MTV show. I forget what it was called. It was in the 80s, I think, where they put these people in the house and they film them, or the concept of the reality show. And you look at the cost that goes into the simpler reality shows, and the cost is so much. Yeah, you hit something like the Kardashians, and that turns into a multi-billion-dollar empire. But a lot of the earlier reality shows, and the reality shows still now, it's like the production costs for them. Yeah, they are scripted. Don't for a minute think they're not. But the costs for them are just so much less, and you're paying people just a whole lot less, and there's so many of them. It's like, well, you can't afford to pay the people, $1 million per episode, like Friends. That was the example for Friends. I think there was five or six Friends in the show, and they were all paid $1 million per episode, some ridiculous amount of money, because NBC at one time had this insane amount of market share because TV was it. That was in the 80s and 90s. TV was huge. And you look at TV now, it's like it's not that way anymore, and it's never going to be that way. Anyway, so anyway, as outside industry competitive pressure increases, the writers and others have got less power because the user can just go watch an Odyssey live stream if they can't get what they want from Hollywood. So, like a writer's strike, I think eventually, like some of the things they're demanding are, I mean, I just don't think the money is there anymore. So I think eventually they're going to concede on some issues and just they're just going to have to go back to it. Because if you're asking for, they're asking for, I think, like in total, it's like 450, I don't know, $1 billion, it's some ridiculous amount of money per year that they want to put into the writers. And you're looking at the Hollywood and stuff, right? It's like, yeah, the money's probably not there. You're going to settle for something, I think, a whole lot less. Where to have a guaranteed minimum income of $350,000 a year, no matter how many episodes you write, it's like I don't see that happening. So the thing about the Hollywood cultural Bolshevik push is, while yes, there was always going to be nepotism, hiring still was, it was nepotism overlaid with merit. They still needed to sell, but now that's changing because they're hiring not on merit but on the Marxist hierarchy. So trans is going to be at the top. Then where's this other image? Probably then African women, then generally just anyone non-European, brown people of some sort, Middle Eastern, Asian. But European men, they're flat out blacklisting, and if they're normal guys, they got to have something that puts them on the oppression hierarchy. So as a consequence, well, the writing sucks, or at least it's like if you enjoy the left-wing propaganda, but as it turns out, fewer and fewer people are enjoying that. Not just because European men are naturally the best writers, but because the others are not selected on merit. They have to be minimally competent. By that I mean they have to know how to write. But that's pretty much it. And if you see stuff like the stuff they've been putting out in the past 10 years, you know they're hiring a lot of these writers who are legitimately to the left of the bell curve. Because they're doing things like, it's not just the grammatical sentences are off, or they're using way too many colloquialisms or slang that doesn't age well, and it's just really regional. But they're doing things like the construct of the show, like the logical order of the motives for the character will be in conflict, and you look like this is only possible when the writers themselves are not the best and the brightest, which is what seems like is happening. And eventually people they find themselves turning off the TV, turn off these shows, because it's just, you're watching dumb shows that are kind of written by dumb people, and it's eventually you feel like, it's kind of embarrassing to realize that you're putting time in this. Anyway, the thing is, if you're not hiring on merit, well, what are you going to get? You're not going to get the best product, and unfortunately now, as you're seeing throughout, it's beyond just entertainment. There's an airline commercial the other day where they are not hiring on merit anymore. So what happens to infrastructure like bridges and buildings and plumbing and sanitation, like everything that makes civilization run, if you don't hire on merit? Well, friends, you're about to find out. Tesla's quote was right. You're going to live to see man. So you got a city, and the freshwater inn and the electrical inn, and then the sanitation systems are all failing. What do you have? Mass disease. Ah, but maybe you should go back to hiring on merit. No, we couldn't possibly do that. Okay, best prepare. Prepare. Get that garden in. Get everything you're gonna need. So anyway, are European men the best writers? Yeah, they seem to think so. I mean, because are Englishmen like on average going to be the best writers? Yeah, probably. That is probably true, or at least European men in general, because those are the stories that most often get stoled and culturally appropriated to be used to turn into propaganda. So it's like, aren't you just saying that these Englishmen and the Scandinavian guy Hans Christian Andersen, like, aren't you just saying that these are like godlike figures to you because you can't write your own stories that connect with an audience? I mean, that's what it really looks like, is when you have to take an Englishman's story, and the best you can do is swap out the English characters for non-English characters. Why don't you just write your own story? And they kind of look around like, we can't. We just can't do it. Oh, anyway, all they need to do is write woke propaganda. It doesn't have to be funny because their sheep audiences are so brainwashed they just clap like the trained seals they are. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, check out the subscribe star, and I will see you guys all next episode. Oops, that's not what I want to do.